Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a reported historic framework of understandings between Israel and Lebanon. We're talking about a situation that combines intense military action, high-stakes diplomacy, and a potential total reshaping of Middle Eastern alliances.
Right out of the gate, we have this incredibly striking message from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu aimed squarely at Iran. He said, "This is none of your business, you have no status here, you have no involvement and no role, not you, not Hezbollah, and not any terrorist organization." This quote really perfectly frames our focus today, which is how this new agreement reportedly attempts to systematically lock Iran completely out of regional security negotiations.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll break down the framework itself, dive into the security of the northern border, explore these U.S.-mediated talks, analyze the sidelining of Iran, and finally look at what the future holds for southern Lebanon.
Section 1. The Israel-Lebanon Framework. Let's get right into the specific mechanics outlined by Israeli officials.
The reported agreement sets up this really fascinating dual-zone approach. On one hand, the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, maintain a security zone inside Lebanon, and the source notes that the U.S. and Lebanon have actually recognized Israel's right to maintain this zone for as long as required. On the flip side, the Lebanese armed forces are tasked with deploying to two specific pilot zones, which were recommended by the IDF with the explicit goal of disarming Hezbollah. But the crucial part, the framework dictates absolutely no Israeli withdrawal until safety is entirely guaranteed.
To really hammer that last point home, Defense Minister Israel Katz stated that Jerusalem has instructed the IDF to prepare for a, quote, prolonged stay in this security zone. So the core principle here, at least according to the source, is that there won't be any redeployment or withdrawal until the Hezbollah threat is completely removed throughout Lebanon, and the safety of Israel's northern residents is 100% assured.
Section 2. Securing the northern border. To really grasp this framework, we have to understand the massive scale of the conflict that led to it.
Think about this number for a second. 150,000. Before Hezbollah joined the war following the October 7th attacks, our source notes they possessed a vast arsenal of 150,000 missiles and rockets. And all of them were aimed directly at Israel.
But then, consider the impact of the resulting military campaign. The IDF claims to have wiped out a staggering 90% of that vast arsenal during the intense fighting that followed. This massive degradation of military capability is presented as the primary driver that essentially forced a diplomatic shift.
And the human toll on the organization has been just as severe. The source reports that over 9,000 Hezbollah operatives have been killed since the beginning of the war. To kind of put the current intensity into perspective, over 200 of those eliminations happened in just the 2 weeks prior to this framework being announced.
These figures follow a series of highly intense, very targeted operations. We're talking about those pager explosions that completely astonished the group, the high-profile elimination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, strikes taking out commanders of the elite Radwan force. Even in the days right up to the agreement, the IDF was conducting targeted strikes on operatives and dismantling rocket launchers near the security zone, in areas like Nabatea and Manzillah, systematically taking out threats.
Section 3. U.S.-mediated direct talks. So all of this heavy military pressure shifted the landscape, leading directly to the negotiating table.
Things moved incredibly fast. It kicked off with the reported killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei on February 28 during Operation Roaring Lion. Naturally, this triggered a resumption of hostilities on March 2nd. Hezbollah renewed its rocket attacks, and Israel launched a broad aerial campaign. Yet, somehow, out of this massive escalation, Israeli and Lebanese officials engaged in 5 rounds of historic, direct talks in Washington, D.C., leading straight into the framework we're discussing today.
A major catalyst during all this was the internal reaction from Lebanese leadership. Following that March 2nd escalation, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun essentially vowed to do the impossible to stop the cross-border hostilities. But more than just stopping the fighting, he actually initiated steps to completely outlaw the Iranian proxy within Lebanon.
These direct negotiations were held at the U.S. State Department under heavy American mediation. The source specifically credits some very high-level figures for getting this framework done, including U.S. President Donald Trump and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, alongside Israel's negotiating team, which was led by Ambassador Yechiel Leiter. Interestingly, the Israeli Prime Minister explicitly thanked the government and people of Lebanon for showing great courage by joining these direct talks. That kind of direct dialogue is highly unusual for the region and signals a massive diplomatic pivot.
Section 4. Sidelining Iranian regional influence. This right here is the crux of the geopolitical shift. Let's analyze how these talks effectively shut Iran out of the regional security conversation. For years, the status quo was pretty simple.
Iran projecting power freely through Hezbollah. But this new reality completely bypasses Tehran. We now have direct negotiations between Lebanon, Israel, and the U.S., with Lebanon making moves to outlaw Hezbollah entirely. It's a fundamental attempt to rewrite the power dynamics of the entire Middle East.
And as Israeli PM Netanyahu stated in the source, this framework is being framed as much more than just a tactical military victory on the border. He called it a historic accomplishment and a massive blow to Hezbollah and its Iranian patron. He stated explicitly, "We are breaking the Iranian axis of terror, but we are also breaking the Iranian diplomatic axis."
Practically speaking, on the ground, Hezbollah found itself entirely isolated. The source explicitly points out that as the IDF applied all that military pressure, the proxy expected assistance from Iran, but they didn't receive it because Israel had previously struck Iran so hard. So, left to face the military pressure completely alone, the pathway was cleared for Lebanon to step in and negotiate directly without any Iranian oversight.
Section 5, the future of southern Lebanon. Finally, let's look at what the long-term strategic goals are for this heavily contested border.
Tactically, Israel is vowing to maintain control of strategic high ground like the Beaufort Ridge while wiping out terrorist infrastructure. They're also aiming to pioneer a global solution for explosive drones. But the stated overarching long-term goal here is incredibly ambitious. They want to transform the northern frontier into a true border of peace. The goal is to see an economic and security revival that mirrors the western Negev in the south.
However, as we wrap up our analysis of this source material, it's absolutely vital to highlight the massive caveat attached to all of this. This entire agreement, the U.S. mediation, this grand vision of a prosperous border of peace, it is all strictly conditioned on one thing: Hezbollah actually withdrawing from southern Lebanon.
Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to ponder. Will this historic framework actually hold up against reality? And can the Lebanese armed forces successfully execute the incredibly difficult task of disarming Hezbollah in those pilot zones? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. We've just seen how massive military pressure forced a diplomatic pivot that could permanently sideline Iranian influence in the region. But as we know, in the Middle East, agreements on paper are tested in the mountains and the valleys. Will this truly become a new border of peace? Keep analyzing the facts, keep asking the tough questions, and I'll see you next time.